when Terra was still a wounded world writhing in the aftermath of Old Night, long before the golden angels of the Legiones Astartes cast their shadows across the stars. The Thunder Warriors emerged from the gene forges of the Emperor's earliest laboratories. Their origins remain shrouded in mystery even to the most learned Adeptus Mechanicus geneters of the 41st millennium. But what fragments of knowledge survive paint a picture of warriors who achieved mastery over superhuman warfare when humanity's homeworld was still divided by countless techno-barbarian kings. In that primordial age of strife, Terra bore little resemblance to the unified throne world that would later command 1,000,000 worlds. Radiation storms scoured the continents, turning vast swaths of ancient civilization into glass and ash. Warlords ruled from fortified cities built upon the bones of the old world, their armies a patchwork of scavenged technology and barely understood relics from humanity's golden past. It was an epoch of endless war, where might alone determined survival, and the weak served only as fodder for the ambitions of the strong. Archaeological evidence places the first Thunder Warrior prototypes somewhere in the late 29th millennium, though the exact date remains lost to deliberate imperial censorship. What scholars can confirm is that these earliest super soldiers represented humanity's first successful attempt to transcend the natural limitations of mortal flesh through genetic manipulation. Unlike the carefully crafted perfection that would later define the Adeptus Astartes, the Thunder Warriors were brutal instruments of war, created through methods that prioritized raw power over stability or longevity. The very name Thunder Warriors speaks to their nature, where Space Marines would be known for their discipline and tactical acumen. These first enhanced humans were living storms of violence, unleashed upon Terra's battlefields with the singular purpose of conquest. Contemporary accounts, few as they are, describe warriors who could tear through powered armor with their bare hands, who felt no fear in the face of certain death, and whose battle cries could be heard over the roar of artillery from kilometers away. Yet for all their legendary prowess, the Thunder Warriors were ultimately a failed experiment, casualties of their own success, and the hidden flaws built into their very DNA. Their story is one of triumph and tragedy, of warriors who conquered a world only to be discarded by the master they served with absolute loyalty. It is a tale that illuminates the ruthless pragmatism that would define the Imperium of man for the next 10,000 years. The Emperor of mankind, in those early days still merely one warlord among many, understood that humanity's reunion with the stars would require weapons beyond anything the scattered kingdoms of Terra could produce. The Thunder Warriors were his answer to that need. Genetically enhanced super soldiers designed to break the deadlock of perpetual warfare that had gripped humanity's homeworld for millennia. They were humanity's first glimpse of what it might become, and perhaps more importantly, what it was willing to sacrifice in pursuit of that vision. In the laboratories hidden deep beneath the Himalayan peaks, the Emperor's earliest gene wrights labored to unlock secrets that had been lost since the dark age of technology. They worked with crude tools and incomplete knowledge, driven by their master's vision of a unified Terra. The results of their labors would stride across battlefields like gods of war, their enhanced physiques dwarfing even the most augmented techno-barbarian champions. But the Thunder Warriors were more than mere weapons. They represented a philosophical shift in how humanity viewed itself and its future. Where the techno-barbarian kingdoms fought for territory and resources, the Thunder Warriors served a vision that transcended such petty concerns. They were the instruments of unification, the living embodiment of humanity's potential for greatness. In their genetically enhanced forms, one could see echoes of the species that had once ruled the galaxy in the distant past. The fragmentary records that survive speak of warriors who stood 3 meters tall, their enhanced musculature straining against armor forged from the finest materials Terra could produce. Their reflexes operated at superhuman speeds, allowing them to dodge lost fire and catch projectiles mid-flight. Most terrifying of all was their psychological conditioning, which rendered them utterly fearless and fanatically loyal to their creator. They were perfection incarnate, at least by the standards of their violent age. Yet even in those early days, there were signs that perfection came at a cost. The same genetic modifications that granted them superhuman abilities also introduced instabilities that would ultimately prove fatal. The Thunder Warriors burned bright but brief, their enhanced metabolisms consuming their bodies from within. Most would not live to see their third decade, their cells breaking down under the strain of constant warfare and genetic degradation. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom and terrible pragmatism, was aware of these flaws from the beginning. The Thunder Warriors were never intended to be permanent, merely a stepping stone to something greater. They were the prototype, the proof of concept that would eventually give birth to the Legiones Astartes. In their sacrifice, they purchased humanity's future among the stars, though few of them would live to see that future realized. This, then, is their story. The tale of humanity's first angels of death, who conquered a world in their master's name, only to discover that conquest was not enough to secure their place in the galaxy to come. They were the thunder that preceded the storm, the violent prelude to an age of wonders and horrors that would define humanity for millennia to come. The Terra of the late 29th millennium bore scars that spoke of humanity's fall from grace with brutal eloquence. Where once a single planetary government had commanded respect among the stars, now thousands of petty kingdoms carved out precarious existences among the ruins of a greater civilization. The warp storms that had isolated humanity's homeworld for nearly 5 millennia had finally begun to recede, but their legacy remained etched into the very bedrock of the planet. Radiation deserts stretched across entire continents, their glassy surfaces reflecting the sickly light of a sun filtered through atmospheric pollution accumulated over centuries of uncontrolled industrial warfare. The great hive cities of antiquity lay in ruins, their adamantine spires twisted into impossible shapes by weapons whose very principles had been forgotten. In their shadows, new settlements arose like tumors, built from the bones of the old world and powered by technologies that their inhabitants only half understood. The techno-barbarian kingdoms that ruled these wasteland domains represented humanity at its most desperate and resourceful. Each warlord commanded armies equipped with a bewildering mixture of advanced weaponry and primitive substitutes. Laser weaponry salvaged from ancient armories fought alongside crude chemical projectile weapons forged in basement workshops. Power armor crafted by master artificers protected warriors who rode into battle on vehicles cobbled together from scavenged parts and fueled by whatever combustible materials could be found. Among these kingdoms, warfare was not merely a means to an end, but a way of life. Generations had been born, lived, and died knowing nothing but conflict. The very concept of peace had become alien, replaced by temporary truces that lasted only as long as it took one side to gain sufficient advantage over the other. Children learned to strip and maintain weapons before they could properly read, and the elderly who survived past their 40th year were regarded as repositories of tactical wisdom rather than sources of comfort or guidance. Yet it was precisely these harsh conditions that created the raw material the Emperor would need for his great work. The survivors of Terra's endless wars were already hardened beyond anything the soft populations of more peaceful worlds might produce. They had adapted to radiation levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes, developed resistance to toxins that permeated the very air they breathed, and possessed an innate understanding of violence that no amount of training could instill in more civilized populations. The genetic damage inflicted by centuries of radiation exposure and chemical contamination had created a human subspecies uniquely suited to the Emperor's purposes. Where other populations might have been rendered sterile or cancerous by such extreme environmental pressures, Terra's survivors had developed a crude but effective resistance to genetic degradation. Their DNA had been tested by the harshest conditions imaginable, and found capable of withstanding modifications that would have destroyed healthier genetic stock. It was in this crucible of perpetual warfare that the being who would become known as the Emperor of Mankind finally emerged from the hidden fastnesses where he had waited out humanity's darkest age. The Himalayan peaks, rendered even more impassable by the geological upheavals of old night, had provided perfect sanctuary for laboratories and workshops where the fruits of ancient knowledge could be preserved and expanded upon. For millennia, he had watched and waited, gathering information about the scattered kingdoms, while perfecting the techniques that would be necessary to unite them. The early genetic experiments conducted in those mountain laboratories were crude affairs by the standards that would later define the Adeptus Mechanicus. Working with equipment that was itself reconstructed from fragmentary schematics and half-understood principles, the Emperor's earliest followers attempted to unlock secrets that had been deliberately hidden during humanity's golden age. Gene therapy techniques that had once been routine medical procedures had to be reinvented from first principles, often at the cost of countless failed subjects. The Proto-Astartes research that would eventually give birth to the Thunder Warriors began with simple attempts to enhance human physical capabilities. Early subjects were volunteers drawn from the Emperor's own followers, men and women who understood that their sacrifice might purchase a better future for their species. Most died in agony as their bodies rejected the genetic modifications, their cells breaking down under the strain of accelerated enhancement. Those who survived often emerged as something no longer entirely human, their enhanced capabilities balanced by psychological instabilities that rendered them unreliable for anything beyond the most desperate circumstances. Yet each failure taught valuable lessons about the limits of human genetic plasticity and the techniques necessary to work within those constraints. The Emperor's gene rights learned to map the complex interactions between different enhancement protocols, discovering which modifications could be safely combined and which would inevitably result in cellular breakdown. They developed surgical techniques that could implant additional organs into human subjects without triggering fatal immune responses, and created biochemical cocktails that could accelerate healing while suppressing the inflammatory responses that killed most subjects. The breakthrough that would make the Thunder Warriors possible came through the Emperor's personal intervention in the research. His own genetic template, refined over millennia of careful self-modification, provided the stable foundation upon which enhanced human warriors could be built. By using his own DNA as a baseline, the gene rights could create subjects who inherited not only enhanced physical capabilities, but also the psychological stability necessary to function as coherent military units. The first successful subjects of these experiments emerged in the closing years of the 29th millennium. Enhanced humans who possessed strength and endurance far beyond normal human parameters, while retaining enough of their original personalities to function as soldiers rather than mindless berserkers. They stood taller than any natural human, their enhanced musculature straining against clothing designed for normal proportions. Their reaction times had been accelerated to superhuman levels, allowing them to track and respond to threats that would be invisible blurs to unenhanced eyes. More importantly, these early proto-Thunder Warriors retained the capacity for tactical thinking and independent decision-making that would be essential for the conquest campaigns to come. Unlike many previous enhancement subjects who had been reduced to barely controlled killing machines, these warriors could follow complex orders, adapt to changing battlefield conditions, and work together as coordinated military units. They represented the culmination of centuries of genetic research and the foundation upon which humanity's future would be built. The transition from experimental subject to functional warrior occurred gradually, as the Emperor's gene rights refined their techniques and expanded their understanding of enhanced human physiology. The earliest Thunder Warriors were created in small batches, with each group serving as a test case for new enhancement protocols and surgical procedures. These prototype warriors were assigned to the Emperor's personal guard, where their capabilities could be observed and evaluated under controlled conditions while providing protection for the laboratories where their successors were being created. The first recorded combat deployment of enhanced warriors occurred during a territorial dispute between the Emperor's nascent domain and the Caucasus Wastlords, a confederation of techno-barbarian kingdoms that controlled access to several critical resource deposits. The engagement itself was minor by the standards of Terran warfare, involving perhaps a few hundred warriors on each side and lasting less than 6 hours from initial contact to final surrender. Yet the performance of the Emperor's enhanced soldiers in that brief conflict would send shockwaves throughout the scattered kingdoms of Terra. Contemporary accounts describe warriors who moved with fluid grace despite their massive size, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge incoming fire while returning accurate shots of their own. They absorbed damage that would have killed normal humans multiple times over, their redundant organ systems and accelerated healing keeping them functional even after sustaining what should have been fatal wounds. Most terrifying of all was their complete lack of fear, charging into concentrated enemy fire with expressions of grim determination rather than the desperate fury that characterized most Terran warriors. The psychological impact of the Thunder Warriors' first appearance extended far beyond their actual combat effectiveness. For generations, the techno-barbarian kingdoms had operated under the assumption that all sides possessed roughly equivalent capabilities, that victory depended on factors such as numerical superiority, tactical brilliance, or superior equipment rather than fundamental differences in the quality of individual warriors. The emergence of genetically enhanced super soldiers shattered those assumptions, introducing a new variable that existing strategic doctrines could not accommodate. Word of the enhanced warriors spread quickly through the intelligence networks that connected Terra's scattered kingdoms. Merchants and travelers carried tales of giants who could tear through power armor with their bare hands, of warriors who felt no pain and knew no fear. These stories grew in the telling, transforming already impressive superhuman capabilities into mythological proportions. But the core truth remained: the Emperor had achieved something that no other techno-barbarian warlord could match. The gradual expansion of the Thunder Warrior program followed the Emperor's broader strategy of controlled territorial expansion. Rather than attempting to conquer the entire planet at once, he focused on securing defensible borders while building the industrial base necessary to support larger military operations. Each successful campaign provided resources that could be invested in additional gene forges and training facilities, allowing the creation of ever larger numbers of enhanced warriors. The recruitment process for Thunder Warrior candidates evolved from the desperate volunteerism of the early experimental phases into a systematic selection program that identified the most promising subjects from across the Emperor's expanding territories. Physical prowess was certainly important, but the gene rights had learned that psychological stability and intelligence were equally crucial for successful enhancement. Candidates underwent extensive testing that evaluated not only their capacity for violence, but also their ability to function as part of a larger military organization. The enhancement process itself remained dangerous and frequently fatal. Even with improved techniques and better understanding of human genetic limitations, fewer than 1 in 10 candidates survived the full transformation from normal human to Thunder Warrior. Those who died during the process were honored as martyrs to humanity's future, their sacrifice remembered in ceremonies that served both to maintain morale among the survivors and to reinforce the quasi-religious devotion that the Emperor encouraged among his followers. Successful candidates emerged from the gene forges as beings that barely resembled their former selves. The genetic modifications that created Thunder Warriors involved not merely enhancement of existing human capabilities, the addition of entirely new organ systems that provided capabilities no natural human could possess. Additional hearts pumped blood through enlarged circulatory systems designed to support enhanced musculature. Modified lung structures allowed the warriors to function in atmospheric conditions that would asphyxiate normal humans. Reinforced skeletal systems provided the structural support necessary for bodies that might weigh 3 times as much as an unenhanced human. The cognitive enhancements that accompanied these physical modifications were perhaps even more significant. Thunder Warriors possessed perfect recall for tactical information, allowing them to memorize complex battle plans and execute them flawlessly even under extreme stress. Their enhanced neural processing speed allowed them to perceive and respond to threats that would overwhelm normal human reaction times. Most importantly, their psychological conditioning rendered them utterly loyal to the Emperor and completely fearless in the face of death. As word of the Thunder Warriors spread throughout Terra's techno-barbarian kingdoms, the initial shock gave way to desperate attempts at countermeasures. Some warlords invested heavily in advanced weaponry, hoping that superior firepower could compensate for the qualitative superiority of enhanced warriors. Others attempted to create their own genetic enhancement programs, though these efforts invariably failed due to lack of the crucial genetic template that made the Emperor's program possible. The most far-sighted of Terra's warlords recognized that the emergence of the Thunder Warriors represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power that could not be countered through conventional means. These leaders began forming defensive alliances, pooling their resources and military capabilities in hopes that collective action might succeed where individual resistance had failed. The stage was being set for conflicts that would dwarf anything Terra had seen since the end of the Age of Strife. The Emperor's response to these developing alliances was to accelerate the expansion of his Thunder Warrior forces, while simultaneously demonstrating their capabilities through carefully selected campaigns designed to maximize psychological impact. Each victory served multiple purposes, securing additional territory and resources, providing combat experience for newly created warriors, and sending a clear message to potential enemies about the futility of resistance. The growing recognition of the Thunder Warriors as a new and unprecedented military force began to influence the cultural and political landscape of Terra in ways that extended far beyond simple battlefield considerations. The very existence of genetically enhanced supersoldiers challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature and potential that had remained unchallenged since the collapse of the Dark Age of technology. If humanity could be deliberately improved through genetic manipulation, what did that mean for the future of the species? The Battle of the Cerberus Mound stands as the first fully documented engagement where Thunder Warriors demonstrated their true capabilities against a prepared enemy force. The Nord-Afric Conclaves, a powerful alliance of techno-barbarian kingdoms controlling the ancient trade routes across what had once been the Sahara Desert, had assembled an army of nearly 10,000 warriors equipped with some of the finest technology remaining on Terra. Rad tanks salvaged from the Dark Age of technology rolled alongside infantry battalions armed with plasma weapons, while overhead, atmospheric fighters provided air support with las cannons and missile systems that could level city blocks. Against this formidable force, the Emperor deployed fewer than 300 Thunder Warriors, supported by perhaps twice that number of regular human auxiliaries. The disparity in numbers seemed to guarantee a Nord-Afric victory, and indeed, many observers expected the engagement to demonstrate the limits of genetic enhancement when faced with overwhelming conventional firepower. The battle that followed would instead become legend, studied by military theorists for millennia, and serving as the template for how superhuman warriors could dominate conventional forces regardless of numerical disadvantage. The Thunder Warriors advanced across the irradiated wastes in perfect formation, their enhanced physiology allowing them to ignore radiation levels that forced the Nord-Afric forces to fight from within sealed vehicles and powered armor. Las fire that should have killed them outright left only superficial burns on their enhanced skin, while projectile weapons that could penetrate tank armor failed to stop their relentless advance. When a direct hit from a plasma cannon vaporized the arm of the lead Thunder Warrior, he simply drew his sidearm with his remaining hand and continued forward without breaking stride. The psychological impact of witnessing essentially invulnerable enemies proved as devastating as their physical capabilities. Nord-Afric warriors who had fought without fear against other techno-barbarian armies found themselves facing opponents who absorbed damage that should have been instantly fatal while showing no signs of pain or hesitation. The traditional Terran tactics of suppressive fire and tactical withdrawal became meaningless against enemies who could not be suppressed and would not withdraw under any circumstances. The climax of the battle came when Thunder Warrior assault squads reached the Nord-Afric defensive positions. Contemporary accounts describe scenes that defied conventional understanding of infantry combat. Thunder Warriors tore through powered armor with their bare hands, their enhanced strength allowing them to rip apart protective systems that had been designed to withstand direct hits from heavy weapons. They moved through defensive positions like natural disasters given human form, unstoppable forces that left destruction in their wake. The technological superiority that the Nord-Afric conclaves had counted on proved meaningless against opponents who could survive direct hits from their most powerful weapons, while closing to hand-to-hand combat range where their own advantages became liabilities. Rad tanks designed to fight other vehicles found their targeting systems unable to track individual infantry moving at superhuman speeds. Atmospheric fighters discovered that their weapons, while devastating against conventional targets, lacked the sustained firepower necessary to bring down enemies who could absorb multiple direct hits and continue fighting. Within 4 hours of initial contact, the Nord-Afric army had ceased to exist as an organized fighting force. Those who survived the initial Thunder Warriors' assault fled across the desert, carrying tales of invincible warriors who felt no pain and showed no mercy. The strategic implications extended far beyond the immediate territorial gains, as word of the battle spread throughout the remaining techno-barbarian kingdoms and sparked a wave of panic that would reshape the political landscape of Terra. The victory at Cerberus Mounds demonstrated several key aspects of Thunder Warrior capability that would define their role in the Emperor's conquest of Terra. Their enhanced physiology made them essentially immune to the radiation hazards that limited the mobility and effectiveness of conventional forces, allowing them to fight in environments where normal humans required extensive protective equipment. Their psychological conditioning rendered them immune to the fear and morale failures that often decided battles between conventional armies, ensuring that they would continue fighting effectively even under the most adverse conditions. Perhaps most importantly, the Thunder Warriors had proven that genetic enhancement could overcome the technological advantages that many techno-barbarian kingdoms relied upon for their military superiority. The plasma weapons and power armor that had dominated Terran battlefields for centuries became merely expensive obstacles when faced with opponents who possessed the physical capabilities and tactical flexibility to bypass or overcome such advantages through sheer superhuman ability. The reaction among Terra's remaining independent kingdoms varied dramatically based on their individual circumstances and strategic positions. Some warlords immediately began negotiating for tributary status, recognizing that resistance against the Thunder Warriors was ultimately futile and hoping to preserve their authority by submitting voluntarily to the Emperor's expanding domain. Others began frantic efforts to develop countermeasures, investing enormous resources in weapons research and defensive preparations that they hoped might level the playing field. The most far-sighted leaders recognized that the emergence of the Thunder Warriors represented a fundamental shift in the nature of warfare that required completely new strategic approaches. Traditional concepts of numerical advantage and technological superiority had been rendered obsolete by the advent of genetically enhanced super soldiers. Victory now depended on factors that most techno-barbarian kingdoms could not replicate: access to advanced genetic manipulation techniques, the scientific knowledge necessary to implement enhancement procedures safely, and most critically, the genetic template that made stable enhancement possible in the first place. Several kingdoms attempted to create their own enhancement programs using captured Thunder Warrior genetic material and reverse-engineered surgical procedures. These efforts invariably ended in disaster, producing either unstable mutants who died within days of their creation or mindless berserkers who turned on their creators. The Emperor's genetic template was not merely a technical advantage, but a fundamental requirement for successful human enhancement, and without it, all attempts at replication were doomed to failure. The growing legend of Thunder Warrior invincibility began to influence recruitment patterns throughout the Emperor's territories. Young warriors who might previously have sought service with local techno-barbarian warlords now flocked to Imperial recruitment centers, hoping to undergo the enhancement procedures that would transform them into superhuman warriors. The promise of genetic transcendence appealed not only to their desire for personal power but also to deeper psychological needs for meaning and purpose that had been largely absent from Terran society during the long centuries of the Age of Strife. The period following the victory at Cerberus Mounds marked the apex of Thunder Warrior development, as the Emperor's gene rights refined their enhancement procedures and expanded their understanding of superhuman warrior psychology. The success of the early campaigns had provided both the resources and the practical experience necessary to transform what had begun as experimental genetic manipulation into a systematic program for creating large numbers of enhanced soldiers. The crude laboratories hidden in the Himalayan peaks expanded into vast underground complexes that could process hundreds of candidates simultaneously while maintaining the sterile conditions necessary for successful genetic modification. The enhancement process itself evolved from the desperate improvisation of the early years into a precise sequence of surgical procedures and biochemical treatments that maximize the chances of candidate survival while ensuring consistent results across large batches of subjects. The gene rights had learned to map the complex interactions between different organ implants and genetic modifications, creating enhancement protocols that could be reliably replicated by trained technicians rather than requiring the personal intervention of master geneticists for each individual case. The physical capabilities that defined fully enhanced Thunder Warriors represented the culmination of decades of genetic research and surgical refinement. A completed warrior stood approximately 3 meters tall, his enhanced musculature providing strength levels that allowed him to lift and throw objects weighing several tons. His reflexes operated at speeds that made him capable of dodging projectiles fired at close range, while his enhanced sensory systems could detect threats and opportunities that would be invisible to unenhanced humans. The cardiovascular modifications that supported these enhanced physical capabilities involved the implantation of additional hearts and the reconstruction of existing circulatory systems to handle the increased demands of superhuman physiology. Thunder Warriors possessed redundant organ systems that allowed them to continue functioning even after sustaining damage that would be instantly fatal to normal humans. Their enhanced healing capabilities could close wounds that would require surgical intervention for unenhanced individuals, while their modified digestive systems could extract nutrition from materials that would be toxic to normal human metabolism. The neurological enhancements that accompanied these physical modifications were perhaps even more significant in determining Thunder Warrior effectiveness. Enhanced neural processing speed allowed them to perceive and analyze tactical situations at rates that gave them decisive advantages over conventional opponents. Their perfect recall for military information meant that complex battle plans could be communicated once and executed flawlessly, even months later. Most importantly, their psychological conditioning created warriors who were utterly fearless in combat while remaining capable of independent tactical thinking and adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. The organizational structure that governed Thunder Warrior forces reflected both their superhuman capabilities and their intended role as the spearhead of the Emperor's conquest campaigns. Unlike conventional military units that required extensive logistical support and careful coordination between different specialties, Thunder Warrior formations were designed to operate independently for extended periods while maintaining full combat effectiveness. Each warrior carried weapons and equipment specifically designed for superhuman physiology, including power armor that could withstand direct hits from heavy weapons and melee weapons capable of cutting through the heaviest conventional armor. The command structure within Thunder Warrior forces emphasized personal initiative and tactical flexibility, rather than the rigid hierarchies that characterized most techno-barbarian armies. Squad leaders were selected based on combat performance and tactical acumen rather than political connections or hereditary status, creating a meritocratic system that ensured the most capable warriors occupied positions of responsibility. This approach maximized the effectiveness of small unit actions while maintaining the coordination necessary for large-scale military operations. The relationship between Thunder Warriors and their creator represented one of the most complex aspects of the early Imperial military system. The Emperor's genetic template had become literally part of each warrior's biological makeup, creating a connection that went beyond simple loyalty or duty to approach something resembling religious devotion. Thunder Warriors experienced the Emperor's approval or disapproval as physical sensations, making betrayal or disobedience not merely unthinkable but literally impossible for properly conditioned subjects. Yet even during this golden age of Thunder Warrior development, subtle signs of the problems that would eventually doom the program were beginning to manifest among veteran warriors. The same genetic modifications that granted superhuman capabilities also introduced instabilities that became more pronounced over time. Warriors who had undergone enhancement years earlier began experiencing cellular degradation that manifested as reduced physical performance, unpredictable psychological episodes, and eventually, complete systemic breakdown that invariably proved fatal. The gene wrights initially dismissed these problems as minor side effects that could be corrected through additional treatments or refined enhancement procedures. Early attempts to stabilize the genetic modifications focused on supplemental therapies designed to support cellular regeneration and prevent the accumulation of genetic damage over time. These treatments showed some promise in laboratory conditions, but their effectiveness in combat veterans proved limited, and many Thunder Warriors who underwent stabilization procedures experienced complications that left them worse off than before treatment. The Emperor himself took a direct interest in solving the stability problem, recognizing that the long-term viability of his conquest strategy depended on creating enhanced warriors who could serve for decades rather than years. His personal involvement in the research led to several breakthrough discoveries about the fundamental mechanisms underlying genetic enhancement, but these advances also revealed the true scope of the challenges involved in creating stable superhuman soldiers. The genetic template that made Thunder Warrior enhancement possible was itself the product of millennia of careful self-modification, representing a level of biological sophistication that could not be easily replicated in other subjects. The Emperor's own genetic structure had been refined through processes that had required thousands of years to complete safely, while Thunder Warrior enhancement attempted to achieve similar results in a matter of months. The instabilities that plagued veteran warriors were not manufacturing defects that could be corrected through better procedures, but fundamental limitations imposed by the accelerated nature of the enhancement process itself. This realization led to the development of what would eventually become the Astartes Project, an attempt to create enhanced warriors using different genetic principles that might avoid the stability problems that limited Thunder Warrior effectiveness. The early research that would eventually produce the Space Marine Legions began during this period, initially as a parallel program designed to complement rather than replace the Thunder Warriors, but gradually evolving into something that would render the original enhanced warriors obsolete. The irony of the Thunder Warriors' golden age was that their very success in conquering Terra was creating the conditions that would make them unnecessary. Each victory brought the Emperor closer to the point where he could begin his expansion beyond Terra, but interstellar conquest would require enhanced warriors who could serve for centuries rather than decades. The Thunder Warriors had proven that genetic enhancement could create superhuman soldiers capable of defeating any conventional force, but they had also demonstrated the limitations of enhancement techniques that prioritized immediate effectiveness over long-term stability. The seeds of their eventual replacement were thus planted during the very period when Thunder Warrior capabilities reached their peak. The same research facilities that had perfected the enhancement procedures that created superhuman warriors were simultaneously developing the techniques that would eventually make those warriors obsolete. The Emperor's vision of galactic conquest required soldiers who could serve not merely for the duration of Terra's unification but for the millennia-long campaigns that would be necessary to restore human dominance among the stars. The philosophy that guided Thunder Warriors into battle reflected the harsh realities of their creation and the brutal necessities of Terra's unification. Unlike the carefully crafted doctrines that would later define the Legiones Astartes, Thunder Warrior tactical thinking was built around a simple premise: overwhelming force applied with absolute conviction would triumph over any opponent regardless of numerical or technological advantages. This approach had emerged naturally from their superhuman capabilities and the Emperor's strategic requirements, but it also reflected deeper psychological changes that the enhancement process had wrought within their altered minds. The core tenets of Thunder Warrior warfare could be summarized in a single phrase that became their unofficial motto: victory through superiority. This concept encompassed not merely physical dominance over their enemies, but a fundamental belief that genetically enhanced humans represented the natural evolution of their species. Thunder Warriors fought not simply to conquer territory or secure resources, but to establish the principle that enhanced humanity should rule over the unmodified masses who lacked the vision and capability necessary for galactic citizenship. This philosophical framework shaped every aspect of Thunder Warrior military doctrine. From strategic planning to individual combat techniques, their approach to siege warfare exemplified this philosophy, as they consistently chose direct assault over lengthy blockades or complex tactical maneuvers. Where conventional armies might spend months reducing fortified positions through attrition and bombardment, Thunder Warriors preferred to demonstrate their superiority through spectacular displays of superhuman capability that left no doubt about the futility of resistance. The conquest of the Marika hives provided the most dramatic example of this approach in action. The sprawling fortress cities that dominated the western approaches to the Emperor's Himalayan stronghold had been built to withstand the heaviest weapons that conventional armies could deploy, their adamantine walls rising kilometers into the poisoned sky while defensive batteries mounted on their peaks could engage targets at extreme ranges. Previous attempts by various techno-barbarian warlords to reduce these positions had failed catastrophically, with entire armies ground down in multi-year sieges that ultimately accomplished nothing beyond adding to the rad wastes that surrounded the hive complexes. The Thunder Warriors approached this seemingly impossible task with characteristic directness. Rather than attempting to breach the walls through bombardment or tunnel beneath them through conventional siege techniques, they simply scaled the vertical surfaces using their enhanced strength and agility while under direct fire from the defenders. The psychological impact of witnessing 3-meter-tall warriors climbing sheer walls at superhuman speed while absorbing damage that should have killed them outright proved more devastating than any artillery barrage could have achieved. The success of the Marika campaigns established patterns that would be repeated across all of Terra's remaining independent kingdoms. Thunder Warrior forces consistently demonstrated their ability to overcome defensive positions that conventional wisdom deemed impregnable, not through superior technology or clever tactics, but through the simple application of capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Their victories served not merely to secure territory, but to propagate the fundamental message that genetic enhancement represented humanity's path to a greater future. The expanding scope of Thunder Warrior operations during this period required the development of more sophisticated logistical and organizational systems than had been necessary during the early experimental phases. The Emperor's gene forges worked at maximum capacity to produce the enhanced warriors necessary for simultaneous campaigns across multiple theaters, while new training facilities were established to ensure that rapidly expanding forces maintained the tactical coherence necessary for effective military operations. The recruitment patterns that supported this expansion reflected the growing appeal of genetic enhancement among Terra's population. Young warriors from across the Emperor's territories volunteered for enhancement procedures despite the known risks, drawn by the promise of transcending normal human limitations and participating in humanity's destiny among the stars. The selection criteria for Thunder Warrior candidates evolved to accommodate this increased volunteer pool, with aptitude tests and psychological evaluations designed to identify individuals who possessed not merely the physical characteristics necessary for successful enhancement, but also the mental flexibility required for superhuman warfare. The training regimens developed for new Thunder Warriors combine traditional military instruction with specialized techniques designed to help enhanced individuals adapt to their dramatically altered capabilities. Recruits spent months learning to control strength levels that could accidentally crush equipment or injure unenhanced humans, while developing the tactical awareness necessary to exploit superhuman speed and endurance effectively. The psychological conditioning that had always been part of the enhancement process was expanded to include philosophical instruction that reinforced the Thunder Warriors' role as instruments of human evolution and galactic destiny. The reactions of Terra's remaining independent kingdoms to the Thunder Warriors' expanding influence varied dramatically based on their individual circumstances and strategic positions. Some smaller polities immediately negotiated tributary arrangements that preserved their local autonomy while acknowledging imperial supremacy, recognizing that resistance against superhuman warriors was ultimately futile regardless of their defensive preparations. These pragmatic accommodations allowed the emperor to secure vast territories without expending Thunder Warrior forces in costly siege operations, while providing the resources necessary to support continued expansion. Other kingdoms chose to resist, despite the obvious futility of conventional military opposition, driven by pride, desperation, or simple inability to comprehend the magnitude of the threat they faced. These conflicts invariably followed similar patterns, with Thunder Warrior forces systematically dismantling defensive positions that had been designed to withstand conventional assault, while demonstrating capabilities that defied traditional understanding of infantry warfare. The growing awareness of Thunder Warrior capabilities began to influence technological development throughout Terra's remaining kingdoms. Military engineers devoted enormous resources to developing weapon systems specifically designed to counter superhuman opponents, creating plasma cannons with sustained fire capabilities and kinetic weapons that could deliver sufficient impact force to damage enhanced physiology. These efforts produced some remarkable innovations in destructive technology, but they also revealed the fundamental limitations of attempting to counter genetic superiority through technological means alone. The most significant development during this period was the formation of the Pan-Terran Alliance, a defensive coalition that united dozens of previously independent kingdoms under a common military command structure designed to coordinate resistance against imperial expansion. The alliance represented the most serious challenge that Thunder Warrior forces had yet encountered, combining the technological resources of multiple advanced kingdoms with strategic planning that took account of superhuman capabilities and attempted to develop countermeasures based on careful analysis of previous imperial victories. The Alliance's approach to anti-Thunder Warrior warfare emphasized mass firepower and technological superiority over the individual heroics that had characterized previous resistance efforts. Their military doctrine called for concentrated artillery bombardments followed by massed infantry assaults designed to overwhelm even superhuman opponents through sheer volume of fire. Special weapons teams equipped with experimental plasma cannons and melta weapons provided concentrated anti-personnel firepower, while mobile artillery platforms offered fire support that could be rapidly repositioned to respond to Thunder Warrior tactical movements. Initial engagements between Thunder Warrior forces and Alliance armies demonstrated that organized opposition using appropriate tactical doctrines could inflict significant casualties on superhuman opponents, even if ultimate victory remained beyond reach. The Thunder Warriors' enhanced physiology made them remarkably resistant to conventional weapons, but sustained fire from multiple heavy weapons could overwhelm even their regenerative capabilities. More importantly, the Alliance's coordinated approach prevented Thunder Warrior forces from exploiting the tactical flexibility that had proven decisive in previous campaigns. These developments forced the first major evolution in Thunder Warrior tactical doctrine since the program's inception. The simple direct assault techniques that had proven effective against isolated kingdoms required modification when facing coordinated opposition equipped with weapons specifically designed to counter superhuman capabilities. Thunder Warrior commanders began developing more sophisticated approaches to battlefield coordination, utilizing their enhanced cognitive abilities to execute complex tactical maneuvers that exploited weaknesses in Alliance defensive positions while minimizing exposure to concentrated firepower. The philosophical implications of encountering organized resistance capable of inflicting significant casualties on superhuman warriors proved even more significant than the tactical adjustments required. For the first time since their creation, Thunder Warriors faced opponents who could challenge their fundamental assumption of absolute superiority over unenhanced humans. The psychological impact of witnessing enhanced comrades fall to conventional weapons forced a re-evaluation of their role and capabilities that would have lasting consequences for their relationship with both their creator and their own sense of purpose. The earliest indications that something was fundamentally wrong with the Thunder Warrior enhancement process manifested not as dramatic failures, but as subtle anomalies that initially appeared to be minor side effects of genetic modification. Veteran warriors who had undergone enhancement during the program's experimental phases began experiencing episodes of cellular instability that presented as temporary weakness, disorientation, and minor motor control problems. These symptoms were sporadic and mild enough that they were initially dismissed as fatigue-related issues that could be addressed through rest and supplemental nutrition. The gene wrights who monitored Thunder Warrior health initially attributed these anomalies to the stress of continuous combat operations rather than fundamental flaws in the enhancement process itself. The warriors affected by these early symptoms had participated in dozens of major engagements over periods of several years, and it seemed reasonable to assume that even superhuman physiology might require recovery time after extended exposure to the extreme stresses of warfare. Medical protocols were adjusted to provide enhanced recovery periods and specialized treatments designed to support cellular regeneration in combat veterans. However, as more Thunder Warriors reached the multi-year mark in their service careers, the frequency and severity of these episodes began to increase in ways that could not be explained by combat stress alone. Warriors who had previously demonstrated perfect physical coordination began experiencing tremors that affected their ability to handle weapons with their accustomed precision. Enhanced sensory systems that had functioned flawlessly for years started providing inconsistent or distorted information, leading to tactical errors that had previously been impossible for enhanced individuals. The psychological manifestations of genetic instability proved even more disturbing than the physical symptoms. Thunder Warriors had been conditioned from the moment of their enhancement to experience absolute loyalty to the Emperor and unwavering confidence in their own capabilities. The appearance of doubt, confusion, and emotional volatility in veteran warriors challenged fundamental assumptions about the enhancement process and raised questions about the long-term viability of the entire program. Dr. Amar Astarte, one of the Emperor's most senior geneticists, conducted the first comprehensive study of genetic degradation in Thunder Warrior subjects during the latter stages of the America campaigns. Her research revealed that the cellular instabilities affecting veteran warriors were not random anomalies but predictable consequences of the accelerated enhancement process that had created them. The genetic modifications that granted superhuman capabilities had been implemented too rapidly for normal cellular repair mechanisms to accommodate, creating accumulated damage that became increasingly severe over time. The Emperor's genetic template, which served as the foundation for all Thunder Warrior enhancements, had been refined over millennia through processes that allowed for gradual adaptation and stabilization. The enhancement procedures used to create Thunder Warriors attempted to achieve similar results in a matter of months, compressing genetic changes that should have required centuries into timeframes that normal human physiology could not safely accommodate. The instabilities affecting veteran warriors were not manufacturing defects but inevitable consequences of exceeding the fundamental limits of biological adaptation. This discovery led to intensive research efforts aimed at developing stabilization treatments that might arrest or reverse the genetic degradation affecting veteran Thunder Warriors. The gene wrights experimented with supplemental gene therapy protocols designed to repair accumulated cellular damage, while also investigating surgical procedures that might replace damaged organ systems with fresh implants. These experimental treatments showed some promise in laboratory conditions, but their effectiveness in actual combat veterans proved limited and often temporary. The most disturbing aspect of the genetic instability research was the revelation that degradation rates were not uniform across all Thunder Warrior subjects. Warriors who had demonstrated exceptional capabilities during their early service careers often experienced more rapid and severe degradation than their less remarkable peers. The very genetic modifications that made the most effective Thunder Warriors also made them more susceptible to long-term instability, creating a paradoxical situation where the program's greatest successes were also its most vulnerable subjects. The Emperor's personal involvement in addressing the stability crisis reflected both his genuine concern for the warriors who served him and his recognition that genetic degradation threatened the long-term viability of his conquest strategy. His direct examination of affected Thunder Warriors revealed aspects of the instability problem that had not been apparent to his subordinate researchers, including evidence that the degradation process was accelerating in ways that existing theoretical models could not predict. The psychological impact of genetic instability on Thunder Warrior morale proved as significant as the physical consequences for individual subjects. The enhanced warriors had been conditioned to view themselves as the pinnacle of human evolution, superior beings destined to inherit the galaxy alongside their creator. The reality that their enhanced capabilities came with built-in obsolescence challenged this fundamental self-concept and created philosophical crises that affected their combat effectiveness and unit cohesion. Some Thunder Warriors responded to awareness of their genetic limitations with renewed dedication to their military duties, reasoning that if their time was limited, they should accomplish as much as possible before their capabilities began to deteriorate. Others experienced despair and resentment that manifested as reduced combat effectiveness, and in extreme cases, behavioral problems that required disciplinary intervention. The psychological conditioning that had previously guaranteed absolute loyalty began to show signs of strain under the pressure of confronting their own mortality. The growing frequency of genetic instability episodes created practical problems for Thunder Warrior military operations that extended beyond the immediate health concerns of affected individuals. Units that had operated with perfect coordination for years found themselves having to compensate for warriors whose capabilities were no longer predictable. Tactical plans that relied on precise timing and flawless execution became more difficult to implement when key personnel might experience coordination problems or sensory distortions at critical moments. The medical facilities that supported Thunder Warrior operations expanded rapidly during this period, as the gene rights struggled to develop treatments for conditions that had no precedent in normal human medicine. Specialized surgical suites were constructed to handle the unique requirements of superhuman physiology, while research laboratories devoted increasing resources to understanding the mechanisms underlying genetic degradation. These efforts represented a significant drain on the resources that might otherwise have been devoted to creating additional Thunder Warriors or supporting expanded military operations. The Emperor's growing awareness of the Thunder Warrior stability problem coincided with his broader strategic planning for expansion beyond Terra. The conquest of humanity's homeworld was nearing completion, but the galactic crusade that would follow would require enhanced warriors capable of serving for centuries rather than years. The genetic instabilities that affected Thunder Warriors made them unsuitable for the long-term campaigns that interstellar conquest would demand, regardless of their effectiveness in the immediate task of Terran unification. This realization led to the acceleration of research programs that had previously been considered long-term projects. The Astartes Initiative, which had been conceived as a potential improvement on Thunder Warrior enhancement techniques, received increased priority and resources, as it became apparent that the existing program could not be salvaged through incremental improvements. The irony that the Thunder Warriors' very success was making their replacement inevitable was not lost on the Emperor, but strategic necessity demanded that sentiment not interfere with practical planning. The first experimental Astartes subjects underwent enhancement procedures during the final stages of the Terran unification campaigns, their creation representing both a technological advance over Thunder Warrior techniques and a tacit admission that the original program had reached the limits of its usefulness. These early Space Marines incorporated lessons learned from years of Thunder Warrior genetic instability research, utilizing enhancement protocols designed to provide greater long-term stability at the cost of some immediate capabilities. The psychological impact on Thunder Warriors of learning that they were being replaced proved even more devastating than the physical effects of genetic degradation. Warriors who had sacrificed their humanity in service to the Emperor's vision discovered that their sacrifice was considered insufficient for the grander campaigns to come. The absolute loyalty that had defined their existence began to show cracks as they grappled with the realization that their creator viewed them as disposable stepping stones rather than permanent partners in humanity's galactic destiny. The genetic instabilities that had initially manifested as minor coordination problems and occasional disorientation began to evolve into something far more sinister as affected Thunder Warriors entered their 4th and 5th years of enhanced service. What the gene writes had optimistically classified as manageable side effects revealed themselves to be symptoms of a cascading biological failure that threatened not merely individual warriors but the structural integrity of the entire Thunder Warrior program. The enhanced physiology that had made these warriors invincible on Terra's battlefields was consuming itself from within, creating internal enemies that no amount of superhuman strength could defeat. The transformation of genetic degradation from inconvenience to existential threat occurred gradually, making it difficult for Imperial observers to recognize the full scope of the crisis until it had reached critical proportions. Veterans, who had previously experienced only occasional episodes of instability, found themselves dealing with daily symptoms that interfered with their ability to function as effective soldiers. Simple tasks that enhanced reflexes and coordination had once made effortless became increasingly difficult, while the perfect recall that had defined Thunder Warrior tactical thinking began to show gaps and inconsistencies that undermined their military effectiveness. More disturbing than the progressive loss of enhanced capabilities was the emergence of psychological instabilities that manifested as episodes of uncontrolled aggression, paranoid delusions, and complete breaks from reality. Thunder Warriors, who had been models of disciplined loyalty, began experiencing violent outbursts directed against their own comrades, their enhanced strength making these incidents catastrophically destructive. The psychological conditioning that had guaranteed absolute obedience to Imperial authority started to fragment under the stress of cellular breakdown, creating situations where enhanced warriors posed threats to the very forces they had been created to protect. The first major incident involving genetically unstable Thunder Warriors occurred during the final phases of the Siege of Ursh, where a veteran assault squad experienced simultaneous psychological breaks that transformed them from disciplined soldiers into berserk killing machines. The affected warriors turned on their own support units, their superhuman capabilities making them virtually unstoppable as they carved through ranks of unenhanced Imperial troops. The incident was contained only through the intervention of other Thunder Warriors, but not before dozens of loyal soldiers had been killed by the very weapons that had been created to defend them. The psychological impact of witnessing enhanced comrades succumb to genetic madness proved devastating for Thunder Warrior morale and unit cohesion. The warriors had been conditioned to view themselves as perfected beings, superior to normal humans in every measurable way. The reality that their enhancements contained built-in mechanisms of self-destruction challenged their fundamental identity and created existential crises that affected their combat effectiveness. Some Thunder Warriors became obsessed with monitoring their own symptoms, searching for signs of impending degradation that might herald their own descent into madness. The Emperor's response to the escalating genetic crisis reflected both his genuine concern for the warriors who served him and his recognition that the situation threatened the completion of Terra's unification. Emergency research protocols were implemented to accelerate the development of stabilization treatments, while new screening procedures were designed to identify Thunder Warriors who might be approaching critical degradation thresholds. These measures provided some short-term relief, but they also consumed resources that might otherwise have been devoted to military operations or the development of replacement enhancement programs. Dr. Astarte's expanded research into genetic instability revealed that the degradation process followed predictable patterns that could be mapped and potentially anticipated. Warriors who demonstrated exceptional capabilities during their early service careers typically experienced more rapid onset of symptoms, while those with more moderate enhancement levels often remained stable for longer periods. This discovery led to the development of rotation policies designed to remove high-risk individuals from active duty before they could pose threats to their units. But it also meant that the most effective Thunder Warriors were precisely those who could least afford to lose. The tactical implications of widespread genetic instability forced major revisions in Thunder Warrior operational doctrine. Military plans that had previously relied on perfect coordination and flawless execution had to be modified to account for warriors whose capabilities might deteriorate without warning. Command structures were reorganized to provide closer supervision of potentially unstable individuals, while new protocols were developed for containing or neutralizing enhanced warriors who experienced psychological breaks during combat operations. The growing awareness of genetic instability among Thunder Warrior ranks created philosophical divisions that threatened the unity of purpose that had previously defined the Enhanced Warrior Corps. Some veterans embraced a fatalistic acceptance of their condition, reasoning that their sacrifice in service to humanity's future gave meaning to their inevitable decline. Others developed resentment toward their creator, believing that they had been deliberately created with built-in obsolescence to ensure that they could never challenge Imperial authority once Terra's unification was complete. The most dangerous development during this period was the emergence of Thunder Warriors, who retained enough cognitive function to plan and organize despite their genetic instabilities. These individuals began forming unofficial networks within the enhanced warrior ranks, sharing information about their condition and discussing potential responses to what they increasingly viewed as abandonment by their creator. The absolute loyalty that had once guaranteed Thunder Warrior obedience was being eroded by the reality of genetic betrayal, creating the possibility of organized resistance from within the Imperial military structure. The Emperor's personal investigation into the genetic instability crisis revealed aspects of the problem that had not been apparent to his subordinate researchers. The degradation affecting Thunder Warriors was not simply a consequence of flawed enhancement procedures, but a fundamental limitation imposed by the accelerated nature of genetic modification itself. The biological mechanisms that govern cellular repair and regeneration operated on timescales measured in decades or centuries, not the months required for Thunder Warrior enhancement. Attempting to compress these processes inevitably resulted in accumulated damage that became increasingly severe over time. This discovery led to the realization that the genetic instability problem could not be solved through incremental improvements or supplemental treatments. The Thunder Warrior enhancement process was fundamentally incompatible with long-term biological stability, making it unsuitable for the extended campaigns that galactic conquest would require. The warriors who had proven themselves capable of conquering Terra were inherently incapable of serving in the millennia-long crusades that would be necessary to restore human dominance among the stars. Faced with the growing crisis of genetic instability and the strategic necessity of maintaining effective enhanced warrior forces, the Emperor's gene rights abandoned the cautious, methodical approach that had previously characterized their research efforts. The principles of gradual refinement and extensive testing that had guided the early development of Thunder Warrior enhancement procedures were discarded in favor of radical experimentation designed to produce immediate results regardless of long-term consequences. The laboratories beneath the Himalayan peaks became theaters of desperate innovation where the boundaries of ethical scientific practice were systematically violated in pursuit of solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The first wave of experimental treatments attempted to address genetic instability through direct intervention in the cellular mechanisms that govern DNA repair and regeneration. Gene rights introduced artificial enzyme systems designed to accelerate healing while preventing the accumulation of genetic damage, creating biochemical cocktails that could theoretically maintain cellular integrity indefinitely. These treatments showed remarkable promise in laboratory testing, with tissue samples demonstrating unprecedented resistance to degradation and enhanced regenerative capabilities that exceeded even normal Thunder Warrior parameters. However, the translation of laboratory success to living subjects proved catastrophically problematic. The enzyme systems that performed flawlessly in controlled conditions triggered massive immune responses when introduced into enhanced warrior physiology, creating autoimmune cascades that attacked healthy tissues along with damaged cells. Test subjects experienced rapid systemic breakdown that progressed far more quickly than normal genetic degradation, with most dying within days of treatment administration. Those who survived the initial immune response emerged with capabilities that were either drastically reduced or completely unpredictable, making them unsuitable for military service. The failure of enzyme-based stabilization treatments led to even more radical approaches that targeted the fundamental mechanisms of genetic enhancement itself. Astart proposed a complete reconstruction of the Thunder Warrior genetic template, arguing that the instabilities affecting veteran warriors could be eliminated by starting from first principles rather than attempting to repair existing flaws. This approach required the development of entirely new enhancement procedures that would create warriors with different capabilities but greater long-term stability. The experimental subjects who underwent template reconstruction represented some of the most extreme examples of genetic manipulation ever attempted on human subjects. The procedures involved the systematic replacement of existing enhanced organs with new implants based on radically different biological principles, while simultaneously introducing genetic modifications that affected every aspect of the subject's physiology. The process required months of continuous surgical intervention and biochemical treatment, during which subjects experienced complete physiological breakdown followed by gradual reconstruction as enhanced beings. The results of template reconstruction experiments varied wildly from subject to subject. creating enhanced warriors whose capabilities differed dramatically from standard Thunder Warrior parameters. Some subjects emerged with physical strength that exceeded even veteran Thunder Warriors, but at the cost of cognitive abilities that were reduced to mere animal levels. Others retained perfect mental function while gaining unprecedented sensory capabilities, but lost the enhanced healing and damage resistance that had made Thunder Warriors effective in combat. A few achieved what appeared to be perfect integration of enhanced capabilities with genetic stability, but these successes proved impossible to replicate in subsequent subjects. The Emperor's personal involvement in the experimental enhancement programs reflected his growing desperation to solve the genetic instability problem before it could compromise the completion of Terra's unification. His direct participation in research efforts led to breakthrough discoveries about the biological mechanisms underlying genetic enhancement, but these advances also revealed the true magnitude of the challenges involved in creating stable superhuman warriors. The genetic template that had made Thunder Warrior enhancement possible was itself the product of millennia of careful refinement, representing a level of biological sophistication that could not be duplicated through accelerated research programs. The most promising development during this period was the emergence of what would eventually become the Astartes Project, an approach to genetic enhancement that utilized completely different principles from those that had created the Thunder Warriors. Rather than attempting to compress millennia of genetic development into months of enhancement procedures, the Astartes program was designed to work with natural biological processes over extended periods, creating enhanced warriors through gradual modification that respected the fundamental limitations of human physiology. The early Astartes subjects underwent enhancement procedures that took years rather than months to complete, with genetic modifications introduced in carefully timed stages that allowed for natural adaptation and stabilization. This approach showed remarkable promise for creating enhanced warriors who could serve for centuries without experiencing the degradation that plagued Thunder Warriors. But it also meant that Astartes enhancement could not address the immediate needs of military operations that required large numbers of superhuman soldiers within tactical timeframes. The parallel development of Thunder Warrior stabilization treatments and Astartes enhancement procedures created complex resource allocation problems that affected both programs' progress. The facilities and personnel required for genetic research were limited, forcing difficult decisions about whether to focus on saving existing Thunder Warriors or creating their eventual replacements. The Emperor's strategic planning increasingly favored the Astartes program, recognizing that long-term success required enhanced warriors capable of serving in the galactic campaigns to come. But political and morale considerations demanded continued efforts to address Thunder Warrior genetic instability. The psychological impact on Thunder Warriors of learning about the Astartes program proved even more devastating than the physical effects of genetic degradation. Warriors who had sacrificed their humanity in service to the Emperor's vision discovered that their sacrifice was being rendered obsolete by a new generation of enhanced soldiers who would inherit the galactic empire they had fought to create. The absolute loyalty that had defined Thunder Warrior identity began to fracture as they grappled with the realization that they were being systematically replaced rather than cured. Some Thunder Warriors responded to this revelation with renewed dedication to proving their continued value, volunteering for increasingly dangerous experimental procedures in hopes of demonstrating that existing enhancement techniques could be salvaged. Others developed resentment that manifested as reduced combat effectiveness and, in extreme cases, open challenges to Imperial authority. The unity of purpose that had previously characterized Thunder Warrior forces began to dissolve as individual warriors pursued different strategies for dealing with their obsolescence. The most dangerous development during this period was the emergence of Thunder Warriors who concluded that their creator had never intended for them to survive Terra's unification. These individuals began to view the genetic instability that affected their comrades not as an unfortunate side effect of accelerated enhancement, but as a deliberate design feature intended to ensure their elimination once their military usefulness had ended. The paranoid delusions that were symptomatic of advanced genetic degradation provided a framework for interpreting Imperial policy that transformed loyal warriors into potential rebels. The crossing of the point of no return occurred when the Emperor made the strategic decision to prioritize Astartes development over Thunder Warrior stabilization, effectively acknowledging that the original Enhanced Warrior program could not be salvaged through any available means. This decision was communicated to senior Thunder Warrior commanders as a temporary resource reallocation, but the warriors themselves recognized it as a death sentence for their kind. The absolute trust that had bound them to their creator began to dissolve, replaced by the growing awareness that their loyalty was not reciprocated by the being they had served with perfect devotion. The implications of this decision extended far beyond the immediate tactical considerations of maintaining effective enhanced warrior forces. The Thunder Warriors had been created not merely as soldiers but as symbols of humanity's potential for genetic transcendence, proof that the species could evolve beyond its natural limitations through deliberate enhancement. The abandonment of the Thunder Warrior program represented an admission that this first attempt at directed evolution had failed, but it also established the precedent that enhanced warriors were expendable tools rather than permanent partners in humanity's galactic destiny. The stage was now set for the final tragedy of the Thunder Warrior saga. As warriors who had conquered a world in their creator's name, discovered that conquest was not enough to secure their place in the empire they had built. The desperate innovations that had been intended to save them had instead revealed the impossibility of their salvation, while simultaneously creating the means for their replacement. The thunder that had announced humanity's rise to galactic power was about to be silenced forever, its echoes drowned out by the marching songs of the Legiones Astartes. The development of the Astartes as the Thunder Warriors' ultimate replacements began not as an open declaration of war against the original enhanced soldiers, but as a gradual erosion of trust that transformed loyal protectors into expendable assets. The Emperor's decision to prioritize the new enhancement program over stabilization treatments for existing Thunder Warriors was initially presented as a temporary measure necessitated by resource limitations and strategic priorities. However, the senior commanders who had served the Emperor since the earliest days of his conquest recognized the true implications of this shift. They were being phased out in favor of a new generation of enhanced warriors who would inherit the galactic empire they had fought to create. The first indication that the Emperor's intentions extended beyond simple program replacement came through subtle changes in Thunder Warrior deployment patterns and operational assignments. Veterans who had previously been entrusted with the most critical military operations found themselves relegated to secondary roles, while newly created Astartes units received priority assignments despite their lack of combat experience. The official explanation focused on the need to provide training opportunities for the new enhanced warriors, but Thunder Warrior commanders recognized the systematic nature of their marginalization. General Yu Tan, the most senior Thunder Warrior commander and one of the Emperor's earliest followers, was among the first to comprehend the full scope of what was being planned. His personal relationship with the Emperor had granted him access to strategic planning sessions, where the future of enhanced warrior forces was discussed with brutal honesty. The conversations he overheard revealed that Thunder Warrior genetic instability was being viewed not as a problem to be solved, but as a convenient excuse for eliminating warriors who might pose challenges to Imperial authority once Terra's unification was complete. The realization that their creator had never intended for them to survive beyond their immediate military usefulness transformed the Thunder Warriors' understanding of their relationship with the Emperor. The genetic template that had made their enhancement possible was not a gift that elevated them to superhuman status, but a deliberate limitation designed to ensure their eventual elimination. The instabilities that plagued veteran warriors were not unfortunate side effects but built-in obsolescence mechanisms that would remove potential threats to Imperial power without requiring direct action against loyal soldiers. This discovery led to clandestine meetings among senior Thunder Warrior commanders, who began sharing information about Imperial planning and discussing potential responses to their impending replacement. These gatherings initially focused on appeals to the Emperor's sense of loyalty and justice, with commanders preparing arguments about the Thunder Warriors' continued value and their rightful place in the galactic campaigns to come. However, as evidence of systematic betrayal accumulated, these discussions evolved into something approaching conspiracy as the enhanced warriors grappled with the reality that their creator viewed them as disposable tools rather than valued partners. The psychological impact of confirmed betrayal proved even more devastating than the physical effects of genetic degradation. Thunder Warriors had been conditioned from the moment of their enhancement to experience absolute loyalty to the Emperor, with their genetic modifications creating biochemical responses that made disobedience literally painful. The discovery that this loyalty was not reciprocated triggered cognitive dissonance that manifested as psychological trauma comparable to the loss of fundamental religious faith. Warriors who had defined themselves entirely through service to their creator found themselves facing an existential crisis that challenged every aspect of their identity. The Emperor's awareness of growing Thunder Warrior unrest led to increasingly sophisticated efforts to monitor and control the enhanced warrior corps. Trusted commanders were recruited as informants, tasked with reporting on conversations and activities that might indicate developing resistance to Imperial authority. Surveillance systems were installed in Thunder Warrior facilities, while new protocols required enhanced warriors to undergo regular psychological evaluations designed to identify individuals who might be susceptible to rebellious thoughts. These control measures proved counterproductive, as they confirmed Thunder Warrior suspicions about Imperial intentions while providing evidence of the systematic nature of the betrayal they faced. The enhanced warriors' superior cognitive abilities allowed them to recognize surveillance techniques and identify informants among their ranks, leading to the development of sophisticated counterintelligence networks that enabled clandestine communication despite Imperial monitoring efforts. The very capabilities that had made them effective soldiers now served to protect them from their creators' attempts at control. The emergence of organized resistance within Thunder Warrior ranks represented a fundamental challenge to the Emperor's authority that had no precedent in his conquest of Terra. Previous enemies had been external threats that could be defeated through superior military force, but the Thunder Warriors possessed intimate knowledge of Imperial capabilities and limitations gained through years of service. Their enhanced abilities made them formidable opponents, while their understanding of Imperial military doctrine allowed them to anticipate and counter conventional responses to their resistance. The discovery of Thunder Warrior resistance networks forced the Emperor to confront the possibility that his most loyal servants might become his most dangerous enemies. The enhanced warriors who had proven themselves capable of conquering Terra possessed the capabilities necessary to seriously threaten Imperial authority, particularly if they succeeded in recruiting support from unenhanced military units who retained loyalty to their enhanced commanders. The situation required careful handling to prevent the Thunder Warrior problem from escalating into full-scale civil war that could undo the gains of decades of conquest. The Emperor's response to the developing crisis combined attempts at reconciliation with preparations for military action against rebellious Thunder Warriors. Selected commanders were offered assurances about their future roles in the Imperial military structure, while others were quietly reassigned to positions where they could be more easily monitored and controlled. These diplomatic efforts were accompanied by the accelerated deployment of Astartes units to key strategic positions, ostensibly as reinforcements for ongoing campaigns but actually as insurance against potential Thunder Warrior rebellion. The most senior Thunder Warrior commanders recognized these maneuvers for what they were: preparations for the systematic elimination of their kind. The offers of continued service were transparent attempts to divide their forces, while the deployment of Astartes units clearly indicated Imperial preparations for military action. The discovery that their creator was actively planning their destruction marked the final collapse of the loyalty that had bound them to his cause, transforming the Thunder Warriors from devoted servants into desperate survivors fighting for their very existence. General Huton's decision to openly confront the Emperor about Thunder Warrior treatment represented the point of no return in the relationship between creator and creation. The meeting, conducted in the deepest chambers of the Imperial Palace, began as an attempt at negotiation, but quickly devolved into accusation and counter-accusation, as both parties acknowledged the fundamental incompatibility of their positions. The Emperor's admission that Thunder Warrior genetic instability made them unsuitable for long-term service was met with Huton's challenge that this instability had been deliberately engineered to ensure their elimination. The breakdown of communication between the Emperor and his first enhanced warriors marked the beginning of the end for the Thunder Warrior Corps. The pretense of mutual loyalty and shared purpose that had sustained their relationship for decades was finally abandoned, replaced by the stark reality that the Emperor viewed them as obstacles to his grander ambitions rather than partners in achieving them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether humanity's first enhanced warriors would be remembered as heroes who conquered Terra or as traitors who threatened the very empire they had helped create. The systematic dismantling of Thunder Warrior authority within the Imperial military structure proceeded with the ruthless efficiency that had characterized the Emperor's conquest of Terra. Orders that had previously flowed through Thunder Warrior command hierarchies were redirected to newly appointed Astartes officers, while enhanced warrior units found themselves increasingly isolated from the broader Imperial military machine. The infrastructure that had supported Thunder Warrior operations for decades was quietly repurposed to serve Astartes' requirements, leaving the original enhanced warriors without the logistical foundations necessary for effective military action. The process of marginalization was implemented with sufficient subtlety that individual Thunder Warriors often failed to recognize the broader pattern until their own positions had been fundamentally compromised. Veterans who had commanded respect and authority for years discovered that their orders were being questioned or ignored by subordinates who had received conflicting instructions from Astartes commanders. The chain of command that had once elevated Thunder Warriors above their unenhanced peers was being systematically restructured to place them under Astartes' supervision, transforming former leaders into supervised auxiliaries. The psychological impact of this institutional betrayal proved as devastating as any battlefield defeat. Thunder Warriors who had defined themselves through their roles as military leaders found their identities crumbling as their authority was stripped away. The enhanced cognitive abilities that had made them effective commanders now served primarily to help them understand the magnitude of their fall from grace, while their perfect recall ensured that they could not forget the respect and fear they had once commanded. The Emperor's decision to accelerate the timeline for Thunder Warrior elimination was prompted by intelligence reports indicating that organized resistance was spreading throughout the enhanced warrior corps. Intercepted communications revealed plans for coordinated action that could potentially unite thousands of genetically unstable supersoldiers against Imperial authority. The risk of allowing such a conspiracy to develop further outweighed any potential benefits of maintaining the pretense of gradual replacement, forcing the Emperor to abandon subterfuge in favor of direct action. The redeployment of Thunder Warrior units from their established positions across Terra was accomplished through seemingly routine military orders that dispersed enhanced warriors while concentrating Astartes forces in strategic locations. Individual Thunder Warriors found themselves assigned to isolated outposts or specialized missions that separated them from their comrades, while veteran commanders were recalled to Imperial headquarters for what were described as important briefings about future operations. These movements were coordinated with such precision that most Thunder Warriors complied with their orders before recognizing the trap that was being constructed around them. General Yushotan's attempts to coordinate Thunder War resistance efforts were hampered by the very communication networks that the Emperor had established to maintain command authority over dispersed military units. Imperial monitoring systems that had been designed to ensure battlefield coordination now served to track and intercept messages between potential conspirators, while the loyalty conditioning that had once guaranteed Thunder Warrior obedience now worked against efforts to organize rebellion. Warriors who might have supported resistance efforts found themselves physically unable to act against direct Imperial orders, their genetic modifications creating biochemical responses that made disobedience literally agonizing. The fragmentation of Thunder Warrior units into isolated groups served multiple Imperial objectives beyond simple force dispersal. Separated from their comrades and embedded within larger formations of unenhanced troops or Astartes units, individual Thunder Warriors lost the psychological support that had helped them cope with genetic degradation and growing awareness of their obsolescence. The social bonds that had sustained them through years of warfare were deliberately severed, leaving enhanced warriors to face their personal crises without the solidarity that might have strengthened their resolve. The emergence of defector Thunder Warriors, who chose to collaborate with Imperial authorities in exchange for promises of continued service, created additional divisions within the enhanced warrior ranks. These individuals, often driven by desperation or genuine belief that cooperation offered their only chance of survival, provided Imperial intelligence services with detailed information about resistance activities and the psychological state of their former comrades. Their betrayal of fellow Thunder Warriors served to further fragment an already weakened force while providing the Emperor with the inside knowledge necessary to counter organized resistance efforts. The speed with which Thunder Warrior resistance capabilities collapsed reflected both the effectiveness of Imperial countermeasures and the fundamental vulnerabilities inherent in their situation. Enhanced warriors who had been conditioned for absolute loyalty to Imperial authority found themselves psychologically unprepared for the complex moral calculations required for successful rebellion. Their military training had emphasized execution of orders rather than independent strategic thinking, leaving them ill-equipped to develop effective resistance strategies against an opponent who possessed superior resources and intimate knowledge of their capabilities. The systematic elimination of Thunder Warrior support networks extended beyond military infrastructure to include the civilian populations that had sustained enhanced warrior operations. Engineers, medical personnel, and logistics specialists who had worked with Thunder Warriors for years found themselves reassigned to Astartes units or transferred to distant postings. The institutional knowledge that these individuals possessed about Thunder Warrior capabilities and requirements was quietly archived while new support structures were developed to serve Astartes' needs. The psychological warfare campaign that accompanied the physical isolation of Thunder Warrior forces proved particularly effective in undermining their morale and cohesion. Imperial propaganda began portraying enhanced warriors as relics of a more primitive phase of human development, superseded by the superior capabilities and greater stability of the Astartes. These messages, delivered through official communications and informal channels, reinforced Thunder Warrior fears about their obsolescence while suggesting that resistance would only confirm their unfitness for continued service. The final collapse of organized Thunder Warrior resistance began when several senior commanders concluded that their situation was hopeless and attempted to negotiate individual surrenders in exchange for clemency. These capitulations, while understandable given the circumstances, served to legitimize Imperial actions while demoralizing those Thunder Warriors who remained committed to resistance. The spectacle of enhanced warriors begging for mercy from the creator they had once served with absolute devotion provided powerful propaganda tools for discrediting any remaining opposition. The Emperor's offer of a final honor guard assignment to the remaining loyal Thunder Warriors represented the culmination of his deception campaign. The proposal, presented as recognition of their service and an opportunity to participate in the ceremonial conclusion of Terra's unification, appealed to the enhanced warriors' desire for meaning and purpose while providing the perfect pretext for gathering them in a location where they could be eliminated efficiently. The irony that Thunder Warriors would be offered the chance to participate in their own execution ceremony was not lost on those who retained enough cognitive function to recognize the true nature of the Imperial offer. General Yusha Tan's decision to accept the honor guard assignment on behalf of his surviving warriors reflected both his understanding of their hopeless situation and his determination to ensure that their end would be worthy of the service they had provided. The choice between scattered elimination as fugitives and collective death as soldiers was not difficult for warriors who had been bred for combat rather than survival. The final gathering of Thunder Warriors would provide them with the opportunity to die together as they had lived united in service to an ideal that had ultimately betrayed them. The stage was now set for the final confrontation between the Emperor and his first enhanced warriors, a battle that would determine whether the Thunder Warriors would be remembered as heroes who died with honor or as traitors who threatened the very empire they had helped create. The infrastructure that had sustained them for decades lay in ruins. Their support networks had been systematically dismantled, and their numbers had been reduced to a desperate remnant. Yet they remained Thunder Warriors, genetically enhanced super soldiers who had conquered a world and who would not go quietly into the darkness that awaited them. Mount Ararat emerged from the dawn mists of Terra's final unification campaign as a monument to humanity's ancient aspirations and its modern betrayals. The towering peak, scarred by millennia of war and environmental degradation, had been chosen as the site for what Imperial propaganda described as a ceremonial honor guard for the Emperor's final victory over Terra's remaining techno-barbarian kingdoms. The reality was far more sinister. Ararat would serve as the execution ground for the Thunder Warriors, a carefully selected killing field where the Emperor's first enhanced soldiers would meet their end far from the populations they had fought to unite. The Thunder Warriors who assembled on Ararat's slopes represented the final remnant of humanity's first attempt at genetic transcendence. Fewer than 3,000 enhanced warriors remained from the tens of thousands who had once served as the spearhead of Imperial conquest, their numbers reduced by years of genetic degradation, systematic elimination, and the gradual attrition of warfare. Those who survived to reach the mountain were the hardest and most experienced of their kind, veterans whose enhanced capabilities had been honed by decades of combat and whose loyalty to each other had been strengthened by their shared betrayal. General Yusho Tan stood among them as their acknowledged leader, his massive frame bearing the scars of countless battles while his enhanced senses detected the subtle wrongness that permeated their supposedly ceremonial gathering. The weapons and equipment that had been provided for the honor guard ceremony were functional but limited, clearly insufficient for any serious military operation but adequate for the last stand that he increasingly recognized as inevitable. The positioning of Astartes units around the mountain's base, ostensibly as additional security for the ceremony, completed a tactical picture that any experienced commander could read with devastating clarity. The Emperor's arrival at Mount Ararat was staged with the theatrical grandeur that had characterized his public appearances since the earliest days of his emergence from the Himalayan fastnesses. Golden aircraft descended from the morning sky while honor guards of pristine Astartes formed ceremonial ranks around the landing sites. The contrast between the gleaming perfection of the newly created enhanced warriors and the battle-worn appearance of their Thunder Warrior predecessors could not have been more deliberately stark, serving as a visual reminder of the transition that was about to be completed through violence. The final conversation between the Emperor and General Yushatan took place in the shadow of ancient ruins that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless human civilizations. The words exchanged between creator and creation were few and formal, stripped of the personal warmth that had once characterized their relationship. The Emperor's acknowledgement of Thunder Warrior service was genuine but cold, while Yushatan's acceptance of their fate carried the dignity of warriors who had served with honor despite their ultimate abandonment. The signal that initiated the final battle came not through dramatic declaration, but through the subtle repositioning of Astartes' forces that indicated the end of pretense and the beginning of systematic elimination. Thunder Warriors who had spent their lives reading battlefield conditions recognized the tactical preparations with the same enhanced perceptions that had made them effective soldiers. The transition from ceremony to combat occurred with the fluid inevitability of warriors who had always known that their story would end in violence. The opening phases of the Battle of Mount Ararat demonstrated the tactical sophistication that years of warfare had bred into both Thunder Warriors and their Astartes successors. The enhanced warriors of the first generation used their intimate knowledge of Imperial military doctrine to anticipate and counter the conventional approaches that their enemies initially employed. Defensive positions were established with the precision of veterans who had studied every aspect of siege warfare, while fields of fire were calculated to maximize the effectiveness of their limited weapons against numerically superior opponents. The Astartes forces that surrounded the mountain possessed every advantage that Imperial logistics could provide: superior numbers, advanced weaponry, aerial support, and the backing of an entire planetary military infrastructure. Their enhanced capabilities, while different from those of the Thunder Warriors, were backed by genetic stability that ensured consistent performance and tactical coordination that reflected months of specialized training. Most importantly, they fought with the confidence of warriors who served a cause that valued their continued existence, rather than viewing them as expendable tools. The clash between humanity's first and second generations of enhanced warriors revealed both the similarities and differences that genetic modification had wrought in the human form. Thunder Warriors fought with the desperate fury of warriors who had nothing left to lose, their enhanced strength and endurance allowing them to absorb damage that would have killed normal humans while continuing to inflict casualties on their opponents. Their combat experience, gained through years of actual warfare, provided tactical advantages that compensated for their inferior equipment and numerical disadvantage. The Astartes responded with the disciplined coordination that had been bred into them through different enhancement techniques, their superior weapons and armor allowing them to engage Thunder Warriors at ranges where the older warriors' close combat advantages were minimized. The genetic stability that made them suitable for long-term service also provided psychological advantages, as they could maintain tactical cohesion under conditions that might have broken units composed of less stable enhanced warriors. The turning point of the battle came when Thunder Warrior positions began to succumb to the sustained bombardment that Astartes artillery units could deliver from positions beyond the reach of return fire. The defensive positions that had initially seemed impregnable were systematically reduced through concentrated firepower, while aerial attacks prevented any possibility of tactical withdrawal or reinforcement. The enhanced healing capabilities that had made Thunder Warriors nearly invulnerable in conventional combat proved inadequate against weapons specifically designed to counter superhuman opponents. General Yushotan's final charge represented both a tactical necessity and a philosophical statement about the nature of Thunder Warrior identity. With their defensive positions collapsing and their ammunition exhausted, the surviving Thunder Warriors faced the choice between surrender and death in combat. The enhanced warriors who had conquered Terra chose battle, launching themselves against Astartes positions with the same desperate courage that had carried them through decades of warfare against impossible odds. The hand-to-hand combat that characterized the final phase of the battle showcased the raw physical capabilities that genetic enhancement had granted to both generations of enhanced warriors. Thunder Warriors who closed to melee range demonstrated the terrible strength that had made them legendary. their enhanced muscles allowing them to tear through Astartes armor and inflict casualties that proved the continuing effectiveness of their enhancement techniques. However, their genetic instabilities began to manifest under the extreme stress of combat, with some warriors experiencing cellular breakdown that reduced their effectiveness at critical moments. The death of General Yushotan marked the effective end of organized Thunder Warrior resistance and the conclusion of humanity's first experiment with genetic enhancement. The veteran commander, his enhanced physiology failing under the combined effects of combat damage and genetic degradation, made his final stand surrounded by the bodies of warriors who had followed him through decades of conquest. His last words, recorded by Astartes witnesses, acknowledged the Emperor's victory while maintaining the dignity of warriors who had served with honor despite their ultimate abandonment. The silence that fell over Mount Ararat as the last Thunder Warrior died carried a weight that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. The enhanced warriors who had announced humanity's rise to galactic power had been silenced forever, their voices replaced by the disciplined cadences of the Astartes, who would inherit their role as instruments of imperial will. The thunder that had once echoed across Terra's battlefields was stilled, leaving only the whispered prayers of the newly victorious and the wind-carried ashes of humanity's first angels of death. The immediate aftermath of the battle saw Imperial forces conducting careful searches of the battlefield to ensure that no Thunder Warriors had survived the massacre. The efficiency with which this task was completed reflected both the thoroughness of Imperial military doctrine and the recognition that even a single surviving enhanced warrior could pose significant threats to Imperial authority. The weapons and equipment that had served the Thunder Warriors were collected and destroyed, while their bodies were prepared for disposal in a manner that would leave no trace of their existence. The hours following the massacre at Mount Ararat witnessed a carefully orchestrated transformation of Imperial propaganda that sought to reshape the narrative of Thunder Warrior service from tragic necessity to dangerous aberration. Within the deepest chambers of the Imperial Palace, teams of scribes and historians worked to revise official records that would eliminate most references to the original enhanced warriors, while emphasizing the superior capabilities and greater loyalty of their Astartes successors. The systematic erasure of Thunder Warrior contributions to Terra's unification began before their bodies had been reduced to ash on the mountain slopes. The immediate practical challenges posed by the elimination of the Thunder Warriors extended far beyond simple record-keeping to encompass fundamental questions about how Imperial society would adapt to the absence of the warriors who had defined its military culture for decades. Thousands of unenhanced soldiers who had served under Thunder Warrior commanders found themselves suddenly leaderless, their institutional knowledge of enhanced warrior capabilities rendered obsolete overnight. The command structures that had evolved to support Thunder Warrior operations required rapid reorganization to accommodate Astartes leadership patterns and tactical doctrines. The psychological impact on Imperial military personnel, who had witnessed or participated in the Thunder Warrior elimination, proved particularly complex and long-lasting. Many soldiers had developed genuine loyalty and respect for the enhanced warriors who had led them through years of successful campaigns, making their participation in the massacre at Mount Ararat a source of guilt and confusion that would influence their attitudes toward authority for years to come. The demonstration that even the most loyal service could not guarantee protection from Imperial displeasure created uncertainty about the permanence of any individual's position within the growing empire. The Emperor's personal response to the completion of the Thunder Warrior elimination reflected the complex mixture of necessity and regret that had characterized his approach to the problem. His private acknowledgement of the enhanced warriors' contributions to Terra's unification was balanced by his recognition that their genetic instabilities made their elimination strategically inevitable. The removal of potential threats to Imperial authority had been accomplished, but at the cost of destroying the very symbols of human genetic transcendence that had inspired his original vision of enhanced humanity. The distribution of Thunder Warrior equipment and facilities to Astartes units proceeded with remarkable efficiency, suggesting that preparations for this transition had been underway for months before the final battle. The gene forges that had created the original enhanced warriors were modified to support Astartes enhancement procedures, while training facilities were reorganized to accommodate the different requirements of the new enhanced warrior program. The institutional infrastructure that had sustained the Thunder Warriors was preserved and repurposed, ensuring that their elimination would not disrupt the broader Imperial military machine. The emergence of unexpected complications in the immediate aftermath of Mount Ararat centered on the discovery that several hundred Thunder Warriors had been absent from the final gathering. either through chance assignment to distant duties or deliberate avoidance of what they had recognized as a trap. These survivors posed ongoing security risks that required the deployment of specialized Astartes hunt-killer teams tasked with tracking down and eliminating the remaining enhanced warriors. The psychological profiles developed for Thunder Warriors during their years of service proved invaluable in predicting their likely responses to the massacre and identifying potential hiding places. The civilian populations that had been most closely associated with Thunder Warrior operations required careful management to prevent the spread of information about the true nature of their elimination. Workers in gene forges and medical facilities possessed detailed knowledge about Thunder Warrior capabilities and vulnerabilities that could prove dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. Many of these individuals were quietly reassigned to distant positions or recruited into newly expanded Astartes support programs where their expertise could be utilized while ensuring their silence about previous activities. The international reactions to the Thunder Warrior elimination varied dramatically based on individual kingdoms' relationships with the Imperial forces and their understanding of what had actually occurred. Some techno-barbarian leaders who had submitted to Imperial authority interpreted the massacre as confirmation that cooperation offered no protection from Imperial displeasure, leading to renewed resistance efforts that required additional military resources to suppress. Others viewed the elimination of the Thunder Warriors as evidence of Imperial instability and attempted to exploit what they perceived as a moment of weakness. The most significant immediate consequence of the Thunder Warrior elimination was the acceleration of Astartes recruitment and training programs designed to fill the gap left by the destroyed Enhanced Warriors. The facilities and personnel that had been devoted to Thunder Warrior maintenance and support were rapidly converted to serve Astartes requirements, while new recruitment protocols were implemented to identify candidates suitable for the different enhancement procedures that created the second generation of Enhanced Warriors. The transition from one Enhanced Warrior program to another was accomplished with minimal disruption to ongoing military operations. The development of new security protocols designed to prevent the emergence of organized resistance among Astartes forces reflected lessons learned from the Thunder Warrior crisis. Enhanced surveillance systems were installed in all facilities associated with Enhanced Warrior operations, while psychological monitoring programs were expanded to identify potential dissidents before they could develop into serious threats. The loyalty conditioning that had proven insufficient to prevent Thunder Warrior rebellion was supplemented with additional safeguards designed to ensure that Astartes warriors would never pose similar challenges to Imperial authority. The broader implications of the Thunder Warrior elimination for Imperial society became apparent through subtle changes in how genetic enhancement was discussed and understood by the general population. The concept of Enhanced Warriors as humanity's evolutionary destiny was quietly abandoned in favor of narratives that emphasized their role as specialized tools created for specific military purposes. The transformation of Enhanced Warriors from partners in human transcendence to expendable weapons represented a fundamental shift in Imperial ideology that would influence attitudes toward genetic modification for millennia to come. The establishment of memorial practices that honored Thunder Warrior service while obscuring the circumstances of their elimination required careful balance between acknowledging their contributions and avoiding questions about their fate. Official ceremonies celebrated their role in Terra's unification while emphasizing their voluntary sacrifice for the greater good of humanity, creating mythologies that transformed murder into martyrdom. These carefully crafted narratives served both to salve Imperial consciences and to provide cautionary tales about the dangers of genetic instability. The Emperor's decision to personally oversee the destruction of all remaining Thunder Warrior genetic material represented the final step in eliminating any possibility of their resurrection or replication. The laboratories that had created the original Enhanced Warriors were purged of biological samples and research data, while the techniques that had made their enhancement possible were classified at levels that ensured they would never again be accessible to potential rebels or enemies. The systematic destruction of scientific knowledge represented an unprecedented act of technological regression that prioritized security over potential military advantages. Yet even as Imperial authorities worked to erase all traces of Thunder Warrior existence, the Enhanced Warrior's legacy continued to influence Imperial development in ways that extended far beyond simple military considerations. The lessons learned from their genetic instabilities informed Astartes' enhancement procedures, while their tactical innovations were preserved and incorporated into Imperial military doctrine. The Thunder Warriors had been eliminated as individuals, but their contributions to human genetic enhancement and military science would endure as long as the Imperium itself. The final irony of the Thunder Warrior elimination was that their death had accomplished what their life could not: permanent integration into Imperial ideology and identity. As living warriors, they had been sources of potential instability and challenge to Imperial authority. As martyred heroes whose sacrifice had made possible humanity's galactic destiny, they became symbols of the dedication and sacrifice that the Emperor demanded from all his servants. The transformation of murdered soldiers into mythological figures represented the ultimate triumph of Imperial propaganda over historical truth. The technological legacy of the Thunder Warriors proved far more enduring than the warriors themselves, as the genetic research and enhancement techniques developed during their creation formed the foundation upon which all subsequent Imperial superhuman projects would be built. The gene forges that had produced humanity's first enhanced soldiers were not merely repurposed for Astartes' creation but fundamentally improved through lessons learned from Thunder Warrior genetic instabilities. Dr. Astartes' research into cellular degradation provided crucial insights that allowed the development of enhancement procedures with far greater long-term stability, ensuring that the Space Marine legions would avoid the fatal flaws that had doomed their predecessors. The surgical techniques pioneered during Thunder Warrior enhancement procedures became standard protocols for all Imperial genetic modification programs, from the creation of Space Marines to the development of specialized servitor classes. The organ implantation methods that had granted Thunder Warriors their superhuman capabilities were refined and standardized, creating a body of medical knowledge that would serve Imperial interests for millennia. Even the failures experienced during Thunder Warrior research provided valuable data about the limits of human genetic plasticity, helping future gene wrights avoid the mistakes that had led to cellular breakdown and psychological instability. The cultural impact of Thunder Warrior service extended far beyond their direct military contributions to encompass fundamental changes in how Imperial society viewed genetic enhancement and human potential. The concept that humanity could be deliberately improved through scientific intervention became a cornerstone of Imperial ideology, inspiring research programs that sought to create specialized human variants, optimized for different roles within the expanding empire. The Thunder Warriors had proven that genetic transcendence was possible, even if their specific implementation had been flawed, establishing the precedent for the countless enhancement programs that would follow. The military doctrines developed for Thunder Warrior operations became the template for how the Imperium would deploy superhuman forces throughout its subsequent history. The tactical principles of overwhelming individual superiority, psychological warfare, through displays of inhuman capability, and the integration of enhanced warriors with conventional forces were all refined during the Thunder Warrior campaigns and later adapted for Space Marine deployment. The strategic concept of using small numbers of genetically enhanced soldiers to achieve disproportionate military effects became a defining characteristic of Imperial warfare across the galaxy. The psychological conditioning techniques that had been used to ensure Thunder Warrior loyalty evolved into the comprehensive indoctrination programs that would define Space Marine training and selection. The methods developed to create fanatical devotion to the Emperor and absolute dedication to Imperial goals were refined and expanded, incorporating lessons learned from Thunder Warrior psychological breakdowns to create more robust and reliable loyalty conditioning. The tragedy of Thunder Warrior betrayal by their creator was transformed into safeguards that would prevent similar crises among their successors. The ongoing secrecy surrounding Thunder Warrior history became a template for how the Imperium would handle other potentially embarrassing or dangerous aspects of its past. The systematic erasure of records and the creation of alternative narratives that served Imperial interests established precedents for information control that would be applied to countless other sensitive topics. The transformation of historical truth into politically useful mythology became a standard Imperial practice, with the Thunder Warrior stories serving as both model and warning for how dangerous knowledge could be managed. The hidden survivors of the Mount Ararat massacre represented an ongoing security concern that required the development of new Imperial intelligence capabilities and elimination protocols. The hunt for remaining Thunder Warriors led to the creation of specialized Astartes units trained in tracking and eliminating rogue enhanced humans, capabilities that would prove invaluable when similar problems arose with Space Marine apostates and traitors in later years. The techniques developed for locating and neutralizing genetically unstable super soldiers became part of the standard Imperial toolkit for dealing with enhanced human threats. The genetic research conducted on Thunder Warrior remains provided crucial data for the Primarch project, as the Emperor sought to create enhanced beings who could serve as leaders for his Space Marine legions. The cellular samples and biological data recovered from Mount Ararat informed the development of enhancement procedures that would create beings of unprecedented capability, while avoiding the instabilities that had plagued the Thunder Warriors. The sacrifice of the original enhanced warriors thus contributed directly to the creation of the Emperor's greatest genetic achievements. The philosophical implications of Thunder Warrior elimination established principles about the relationship between creator and creation that would define Imperial attitudes toward enhanced humans for millennia to come. The demonstration that even the most loyal service could not guarantee survival if strategic circumstances changed created a culture of expendability among Imperial super soldiers that accepted personal obsolescence as the price of serving the greater good. The Thunder Warriors had been transformed from partners in human transcendence into cautionary tales about the dangers of challenging Imperial authority. The industrial infrastructure developed to support Thunder Warrior operations became the foundation for the massive manufacturing complexes that would eventually supply the Space Marine legions and other Imperial military forces. The gene forges, training facilities and weapons production centers that had served the original enhanced warriors were expanded and improved, creating the industrial base necessary to support galactic conquest. The Thunder Warriors had not merely conquered Terra, but had also established the logistical foundations that would make interstellar empire possible. The medical knowledge gained from treating Thunder Warrior genetic degradation contributed to the development of life extension techniques and genetic therapies that would benefit Imperial elites for thousands of years. The research into cellular breakdown and regenerative failure provided insights into the fundamental mechanisms of aging and genetic damage, leading to treatments that could extend human lifespan and enhance physical capabilities within normal human parameters. The suffering of genetically unstable warriors was transformed into medical advances that served the broader Imperial population. The propaganda techniques developed to manage Thunder Warrior elimination became standard methods for controlling public perception of Imperial policy and military operations. The transformation of massacre into martyrdom demonstrated the power of carefully crafted narratives to reshape historical understanding, while the systematic erasure of inconvenient truths established precedents for information control that would be applied throughout Imperial history. The Thunder Warriors had become unwilling pioneers in the development of totalitarian communication strategies. The strategic lessons learned from Thunder Warrior genetic instability influenced Imperial policy regarding the development and deployment of all subsequent enhanced human forces. The recognition that genetic enhancement could create capabilities that exceeded normal human parameters, while introducing vulnerabilities that might prove strategically decisive, led to the development of more conservative approaches to superhuman warfare. The Astartes program incorporated multiple safeguards designed to prevent the emergence of problems similar to those that had doomed the Thunder Warriors. The emotional and psychological trauma experienced by Imperial personnel who participated in the Thunder Warrior elimination created lasting changes in military culture and attitudes toward authority. The demonstration that Imperial service could require participation in the murder of loyal comrades established a precedent for absolute obedience that would characterize Imperial military doctrine for millennia. The Thunder Warriors had been transformed from heroes into victims, but their sacrifice had also created the psychological foundations for an empire built on unquestioning loyalty and acceptance of necessary atrocities. The archaeological expeditions that occasionally stumble upon fragments of Thunder Warrior equipment or genetic material in the deep places of Terra continue to provide tantalizing glimpses into humanity's first systematic attempt at genetic transcendence. These discoveries, invariably classified at the highest levels of Imperial security and removed from public knowledge within hours of their recovery, represent physical evidence of a program that official Imperial history acknowledges only in the most general terms. The power armor fragments found in the ruins beneath the Himalayan peaks bear design characteristics that predate Space Marine equipment by centuries, while genetic samples recovered from ancient laboratory sites show enhancement patterns that differ significantly from later Astartes modifications. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond simple historical curiosity, to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of human genetic enhancement and the true capabilities that the Emperor's early research achieved. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who have been granted access to Thunder Warrior artifacts, report enhancement techniques that in some ways exceeded those used to create Space Marines, particularly in terms of raw physical capability and sensory enhancement. The genetic instabilities that doomed the Thunder Warriors appear to have been the price paid for capabilities that pushed human enhancement beyond the limits of biological sustainability. The persistent rumors that occasionally surface among Imperial Guard regiments about ghost warriors, encountered in Terra's deepest archaeological sites, reflect the enduring power of Thunder Warrior mythology, even among populations that have no official knowledge of their existence. These stories, typically dismissed as folklore, or the products of radiation-induced hallucinations, describe encounters with enhanced humans of immense size and capability, who appear to be neither space marines nor any other recognized Imperial supersoldier type. While most such accounts can be attributed to misidentification or imagination, the consistency of certain details across multiple independent sources suggests that some fragments of Thunder Warrior legacy may have survived in forms that Imperial authorities have yet to discover or acknowledge. The connection between Thunder Warrior research and the later development of the Primarch project represents one of the most significant but least understood aspects of the Emperor's genetic engineering programs. The technological foundations established during Thunder Warrior creation provided crucial experience with large-scale genetic modification that informed the far more ambitious project of creating beings who could serve as military commanders and genetic templates for entire Space Marine legions. The failures experienced during Thunder Warrior development helped identify the biological and psychological parameters that would need to be addressed in creating stable enhanced beings capable of millennia-long service. The philosophical questions raised by Thunder Warrior elimination continue to influence Imperial attitudes toward genetic enhancement and the relationship between creators and their enhanced creations. The demonstration that even perfect loyalty and successful service could not guarantee survival if strategic circumstances changed established precedents about the expendability of superhuman warriors that would be applied to countless other Imperial programs. The Thunder Warriors had proven that genetic transcendence was possible, but they had also demonstrated that such transcendence came with costs that extended beyond the individuals who underwent enhancement. The strategic lessons learned from Thunder Warrior genetic instability informed the development of safeguards and monitoring systems that became standard features of all subsequent Imperial enhancement programs. The recognition that genetic modification could create not only desired capabilities but also unpredictable vulnerabilities led to more conservative approaches to human enhancement that prioritized long-term stability over maximum capability. The Astartes program incorporated multiple backup systems and fail-safes designed to prevent the emergence of problems similar to those that had doomed the Thunder Warriors. The ongoing secrecy surrounding Thunder Warrior history reflects broader Imperial concerns about maintaining control over dangerous knowledge and preventing the emergence of alternative narratives that might challenge official ideology. The systematic suppression of information about humanity's first enhanced warriors serves as both practical security measure and symbolic statement about Imperial authority to determine which aspects of history deserve preservation and which should be consigned to oblivion. The Thunder Warriors exist in Imperial consciousness as carefully managed mythology rather than historical fact. The technological principles underlying Thunder Warrior enhancement continue to influence Imperial research into genetic modification and human improvement, even as the specific techniques used to create them remain classified beyond the reach of most Imperial scientists. The basic concepts of organ implantation, genetic template modification, and psychological conditioning that define Thunder Warrior creation have been refined and applied to countless other projects, from the development of specialized servitor classes to experimental programs aimed at creating humans adapted for specific environmental conditions. The emergence of Space Marine chapters that claim descent from or inspiration by Thunder Warrior traditions represents an interesting development in Imperial military culture, even though such claims are historically impossible given the complete elimination of the original enhanced warriors. These chapters, typically founded during later Imperial periods when detailed knowledge of Thunder Warrior history had been largely suppressed, have created mythologies that honor what they believe to be Thunder Warrior ideals while remaining entirely loyal to Imperial authority. Their existence demonstrates the enduring appeal of the Thunder Warrior concept even among populations that lack accurate knowledge of the original program. The implications of Thunder Warrior genetic research for the Emperor's broader goals of human evolution and galactic conquest remain subjects of intense speculation among the few Imperial scholars who possess access to classified historical materials. The enhancement techniques developed during the Thunder Warrior program represented crucial steps toward the Emperor's ultimate vision of genetically transcendent humanity, even though the specific implementation proved unsustainable. The knowledge gained from their creation and eventual failure informed all subsequent Imperial enhancement programs and contributed to the development of capabilities that would prove essential for galactic conquest. The continuing relevance of Thunder Warrior history to current Imperial challenges becomes apparent when examining modern problems related to genetic enhancement, superhuman warrior management, and the relationship between individual loyalty and strategic necessity. The precedents established during Thunder Warrior elimination continue to influence Imperial policy regarding enhanced humans who might pose threats to established authority, while the techniques developed for managing genetically unstable super soldiers remain relevant for dealing with similar problems among Space Marine forces and other enhanced populations. The ultimate tragedy of the Thunder Warriors lies not merely in their elimination, but in the transformation of their story from historical fact into Imperial mythology. The warriors who conquered Terra in the Emperor's name have been reduced to carefully managed symbols that serve current Imperial needs rather than accurate representations of their actual achievements and sacrifices. Their legacy lives on in the genetic techniques, military doctrines, and organizational principles that they helped develop, but their individual contributions and the circumstances of their destruction have been obscured by layers of propaganda and deliberate historical revision. The Thunder Warriors represent humanity's first successful attempt to transcend the biological limitations that had constrained the species since its emergence, proving that genetic enhancement could create capabilities far beyond normal human parameters. Their failure was not in their achievements but in their obsolescence, as strategic requirements that prioritized long-term stability over immediate capability rendered them unsuitable for the galactic campaigns that would define humanity's future among the stars. They were the thunder that announced the storm, the violent prelude to an age of wonders and horrors that continues to shape the galaxy in the grim darkness of the far future. In the end, the Thunder Warriors achieved a form of immortality that they could never have anticipated. Though their bodies were reduced to ash on Mount Ararat, and their names were stricken from official records, their genetic legacy lives on in every Space Marine who serves the Imperium, while their tactical innovations continue to influence Imperial military doctrine across a million worlds. They were humanity's first angels of death, imperfect and doomed, but ultimately successful in their greatest mission, proving that humanity could evolve beyond its natural limitations and take its place among the stars as a species worthy of galactic dominance. The storm they heralded continues to rage across the galaxy, and in its thunder, those who know how to listen can still hear the echoes of warriors who conquered a world and died for the crime of loving their creator more than he could ever love them in return.